welcome to this month's Fintech Firebrand. I'm Virginie O'Shea, founder of Firebrand Research, and I'm here to chat to you about this month's Fintech and finreg news. Now, I can't start the May episode without mentioning the shortening of the settlement cycle that's happening at the end of this month in North America and a couple of countries in Latin America as well. So, as we all know, on the 28th, the US market is moving to a T+1 settlement cycle from its current T+2 settlement cycle. So is Canada the day before, because they don't have a bank holiday. And we've also got similarly matched moves in Mexico and Argentina this month, also confirmed it will be making that same move on the same day as the US. Now, there's been a lot of discussion on this every month about the level of preparedness of the industry, some of the challenges, some of the worries that firms have. Now, there are a lot of concerns, obviously, for go live. There was an expectation that settlement failures will increase during that particular period in time, depending on how long it takes for the move to happen. So we would like to see, hopefully, most of the market will be ready in time, but there are obviously quite a few laggards out there. Unfortunately, if you look at the DTCC's recent figures, they've noted that about 25% of the flow at the moment in equities same day is not being affirmed on the same day. So that's certainly a worry from a level of preparedness perspective. Firebrand, obviously, we've done some research. We expect there's going to be about a 30% increase in fails, and that may, as I say, last for a few months, depending on how long it takes for everybody to address the underlying causes of those failures. Unfortunately, given the tight time frame that we've had, there are still some outstanding questions. There's been some discussion. Not everybody's made the move to shorten the ETFs settlement cycles as well that are related for the underlying securities. So certainly that's another big question out there. CLS, the continuous link settlement cycle for FX, the platform provider there, has indicated that they're not actually going to be extending their opening hours as was requested by some market participants, particularly some of those on the buy side. So there's been a bit of concern about that as well. So a lot of open questions. I know that the rest of the world is going to be watching intently at the end of this month to see what happens, to see what kinds of lessons can be brought into their own settlement moves. I know the UK, for example, the settlement cycle task force has been set up to take over the work that was initially done by the assessment group. They're sort of looking at the practical nature of the move as well. They're hoping to align with the EU and Switzerland in terms of when that market moves as well. A lot of discussion about whether 2027 will be the time when we move. So in Europe, so it'll be interesting to see some of the lessons learned for that particular move, though obviously big difference between one market in the US moving versus 27 different markets in the EU plus Switzerland and the UK. So that would be much more complex, no doubt, in terms of some of the cross-border considerations too. But definitely the biggest news this month to watch out for. Another interesting development in the US market has been the ongoing debate within the US House about something that the Securities and Exchange Commission proposed last year or changed last year with the SAB 121 rules that were amended to make custodians, as in traditional custodians, hold crypto assets on their books when they offer to support them. So this has obviously deterred a lot of the cryptocurrencies, not crypto assets, I should clarify. But this has deterred a lot of the traditional providers from stepping into this market. It's obviously cost prohibitive for some of these providers to be working in that way. So a lot of the custody is now being done by the non-traditional providers in the market, those that operate within the cryptocurrency sphere. So largely, I think at the moment, Coinbase, I think, is the #1 provider for a lot of the firms out there, which is, again, a concentration risk. So there's been vigorous debate amongst US politicians about the legitimacy of this particular move by the SEC. And there was a vote this month to repeal the motion that actually did get passed by the majority, including both Republicans and Democrats in the House. However, we are currently in limbo because the US President Biden has said that he does not want to disrupt matters for the SEC, so maybe vetoing this particular repeal. So lots of debate ongoing about this topic. Obviously, it sort of impacts in the longer term, that it impacts the digital asset space to some extent, but it also changes some of the notions around qualifying custodians as well. So there's been a lot, it has caused vigorous debate. So I imagine this is going to continue to be a topic. We've got the US elections coming up. That may change things dramatically from a FinReg angle. That's going to be one of my final thoughts here as to the changes out there and what that could mean for the long term. But certainly we're going to hear more and more discussion about this topic, no doubt, this year. And another reminder from this side of the pond, this month, the ESAs, the European level regulators across the various sectors of financial services, are going to be doing some testing work for the Digital Operational Resilience Act. So they've asked for volunteers. I did mention this last month, but they've asked for volunteer firms to step forward and test out their capabilities with regards to DORA reporting. There's going to be a lot of discussion in the coming months, given we've got until January for a lot of the work to be done and prep for DORA when it comes into force on the 25th of January. But this testing process is going to help firms understand how to build their register information in the correct format for steady state reporting from the start of next year, to test the reporting process with the various ESAs and their national competent authorities involved, looking at sort of data quality issues, being able to address those data quality issues, particularly with formats. And it will also help the authorities themselves provide feedback on how internal processes could be improved on the part of financial institutions. Now, as we know, when it comes to these things, not a lot of people step forward to volunteer. They're volunteering as tributes almost in the Hunger Games, but not quite as dramatic as that. But it is a very important process for both the regulators and the industry to understand where problems may lie ahead. So it'll be interesting to see how many firms engage in this pilot and what kinds of things they learn. And it will give us a heads up as to what kinds of issues we'll see when the DORA enforcement, when DORA comes into force, I should say, not enforcement quite yet, but we'll see what fines on the enforcement front could happen next year, as they are part of the DORA regime in terms of reporting as well. So definitely a lot to watch and monitor on that front. And again, on European regulatory front, there's a lot of activity, as always, every year. The European Securities and Markets Authority, ESMA, this month also put out its call for evidence for review of the UCITS directive. So I think we're up to UCITS 6 and 7 at the moment. So the idea is to extend the UCITS regime to newer asset classes, including some crypto assets, I believe. So they're seeking input from the markets, including retail investors, around the benefits, the risks involved in extending UCITS. So lots of work to go ahead on this front. Certainly, as I say, there's going to be multiple iterations of UCITS. It's an ongoing piece of work for the European regulator. So certainly they, as part of the Capital Markets Union, are seeking to extend and support retail investment across the region. So big priority for the CMU. So obviously UCITS is an important factor in that because it is where a lot of retail investors choose to put their funds. So certainly something, again, to keep an eye out for, particularly for those monitoring the buy side. Turning to Asia now, some interesting moves this month with the Hong Kong Monetary Authority. They announced that they've formed a new architecture community under the auspices of Project Ensemble, which is focused on supporting the development of a wholesale central bank digital currency. It's working with the Chinese authorities and the Hong Kong authorities. And the plan is to develop industry standards and set up a sandbox that is going to be launched mid-year, it says. And there'll be some tests conducted to be able to help market participants understand the benefits and the challenges and all of these things to do with launching a wholesale CBDC. It's been, one of many across the markets of such initiatives, probably the one that's the furthest down the road in terms of actual reality and development. So certainly everyone will be keeping an eye on that. From the international central bank front, I think there's a lot of interest, particularly in Europe, on wholesale CBDC, which is the slightly less controversial CBDC. The retail CBDC seems to have seen much more pushback internationally. So definitely one to watch if you're interested in digital assets. The interesting Asian development as well. The Korean regulator, the Korean Financial Services Commission, announced that it has also last month developed ESG standards, and it's including setting up a dedicated task force and making its own dedicated investments into climate technology funds, or setting up climate technology funds. So certainly, I think we've heard a lot from Singapore, a lot from Hong Kong and China over recent months about their own initiatives around ESG. We had obviously the first Hong Kong Green Week last month, and now we're seeing much more activity on the Korean front. So certainly a lot of activity going on in Asia. Has been a bit of a slowdown elsewhere. And in terms of the US, we've seen the SEC's, obviously, as I mentioned before, stalled on its own ESG proposals because it's facing lawsuits from both pro and anti-ESG lobby groups. So certainly interesting to see at this point in time how much disparity there is across the globe on this topic. It will be interesting to see, and as my final thoughts for the month, how the various elections across the globe impacts the longevity of some of the financial regulations we've got out there. Certainly, I think about 60% of the world is having an election this year, so you can expect a lot of macro volatility, some of the challenges inherent in waiting to see what happens in the long run with regards to I guess, the economic proposals from various parties as well. When we look at it from a finreg standpoint, the EU in particular, their EU elections will impact the European Commission, what the Commission looks like, its focus for the continuing years. So we'll see a new European Commission with new priorities emerge out of the elections, for one. There's been a lot of nervousness. I was at TSAM earlier in the month, the buy-side focus conference in London, and there was a lot of chatter about long-term what happens to ESG-focused regulations in the bloc if a more rightwards-leaning EU Parliament is in place. Could we see the end of SFDR and CSDDD and CSRD? That will be, it's a big question mark. Could other things related to the tax directive, the FASTA directive, could that be slowed down or eliminated from the list of new FinRegs coming in? These are all questions to be asking. Likewise, in the US, what happens to the SEC if we have a different presidency? There's been a lot of proposals about changing the makeup and the focus of the SEC and the powers of the SEC. So maybe we'll see some changes this year. Certainly, it makes a lot of people very nervous when we talk about this. So from a budget standpoint, we're seeing a lot of pause buttons being pressed at the start of this year. They have not been lifted and will unlikely be lifted until there's a bit more security about what the long-term future of the markets is. But certainly we can expect a bit of a roller coaster ride this year. Hopefully we'll see some positive changes as well as some of the ones that are going to be slightly challenging. We've also, don't forget, in the UK, as you can tell, going to have a different, possibly a different makeup in terms of political powers here. What happens with regards to things like the development, the market's development as a crypto hub in that case. So definitely lots of question marks, not yet got the answers, but definitely something to think about.